As we continue in the book of Ezekiel, we will be beginning chapter 4 today. I'm just reminding you about, holding your tongue at certain times and places in from Ezekiel, remembering that God made him dumb. You see, people react badly to the truth as the truth insists in change. The people of the church may even react worse. We all contend to know the scriptures and the Bible, but we don't apply and do the things prescribed by it. So if someone brings it to your attention, the things that we are at fault with, and we show our emotions in a non-Christian way, a non-Christian like manner, we begin to oppose rather than take correction. Some giving opportunity to remove themselves from the assembling. Any reason to stay away from the church. This is what I'm telling you all here right now. From activities, from fellowship, not recognizing the error of your ways is a serious attitude of rebelliousness and Christian immaturity. For all of you all who have heard that. God then tells Ezekiel that he will speak, but at the right time. And he will let them know that it's his words and they will stand whether they act upon it or they don't. Keeping in mind, we know how disobedient and contemptuous you are. You just want to go on deceiving yourselves. Take God's warnings seriously. Allow God to direct your speech. There are times being dumb in certain matters will be the correct move. What you have to say or the actions that you have to do, let it be on God's direction. He will let you know the right time to say the right things. Let God direct your speech. Do not look at being dumb today one way. As only aligned to speech, align it to your actions also. You see, you may think that it may be the right time to carry out a certain action, but it may not be. God will direct you when to. Hold on some of the things you may have been eager to do. It will profit you better to be patient today in some matters. Chapter 4, from verses 1, begins as God directs the prophet to take what is described as a tile, a thin slab of clay, mortar, wood or otherwise, and draw on it or reserve on it an area for the city of Jerusalem. Keep in mind that Jerusalem has already been taken into captivity. They are presently in the captivity stage. Verse 2, God then directs the prophet to literally lay siege against the city replicated on the tile, demonstrating warfare intended against it, showing an army, vehicles of war, and a mount of or a blockade. This clearly sets the stage for a war. But against who? Again, I remind you that Israel is already in captivity. And those of the preceding Assyrian captivity have never returned. No, this needs your imagination to be activated. Seeing these things are literally being done by the prophet. Literally, he's doing this. God then tells him to erect a wall of iron. Walls are usually made of brick or wood. And places Ezekiel now in the midst of the picture as this wall now separates him from the besieged city of Jerusalem and the army surrounding it. God then tells him to set his face against it. He actually would be laying siege on the city. Lay siege to the siege. Now, imagine Ezekiel, the priest of long ago, a man heavy with hair, lying down on the ground in the midst of a Hebrew Israelite community with his face pressed and facing an iron pot, not pretending to be an iron wall. This would tell that his safety is above all else while doing the work of God. The work that God has him to do, he is safe in it. And God has him to do in showing what has to take place in Jerusalem. He then has to act on behalf of both kingdoms to bear their sins. He has to act on behalf of both kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The fact that you know God doesn't mean that you are not going to face the consequences of your sinful ways. This God is making clear through the prophet. Verses 4 to 5 and 6, he says to Ezekiel, 1 day for a year. So he is now bound to lie on his left side for 390 days, representing the sins of the house of Israel. Then separately he has to lie on his right side for the house of Judah, northern and southern. 40 days enforcing the fact that sin will not go unpunished by God. Pay attention to what should be determined, the key word in verses 4, 5, and 6, which is bear. While Ezekiel is doing this, verses 7, his arm is to be uncovered, so he will be able to make gestures while he speaks as God tells him to prophesy against the city. This would show that he has freedom and authorization from God. He is representing him with an outstretched arm. Verse 8, Ezekiel is also informed that his movement will be restricted until he completes as God has directed him. What it asks, do you think that you can be as obedient as Ezekiel in carrying out God's bidding? Putting pride aside and putting his will first, being able to trust him completely when it comes to carrying out his tasks. The restriction of his movement also has to be carefully applied and understood in verses 8. I will lay bands upon thee. We like Ezekiel have to carry out the tasks God has given to us, putting pride aside, carrying out his will as he desires us to speak his word against a sinful nation, letting them know that no amount of sin will go unpunished by God, so repent and change your ways. Now, siege warfare was an effective type of warfare used and was based on the idea of cutting off supply. It was the kind of warfare which required great resources, whether you were carrying out the siege or if you were under the siege. Now, the method of a successful siege depended on you being able to outlast your opponent until either they starve or surrender. Today, realize that the enemy has us surrounded with so many ungodly things, from immorality, crime, gender neutrality, and unbelief. And there is a way we can defeat the enemy, and that is by laying siege to the siege, by cutting off the supply of what feeds the evil of the enemy, causing him to give up, or the attacks to die. Today, put the siege under siege. Surround every ungodly attack with prayer, worship, praise, and faith, and cut off the enemy and receive the victory. Lay siege to the siege. This is Pastor Solomon.